We are live.
Ngaitla, everyone. Kunishish Hawa so much for joining us tonight for this really special live stream. I mean, honestly, what else would you do on a Friday night? This is the hot topic for your date night with your family, with your friends. So I hope you're all gathered around joining us. We cannot thank you enough for spending your evening with us. My name is Lagunai Liz Medicine Crow. I'm Haida and Tlingit. I come from Tijuana, which is where I'm zooming in from tonight. And I work for First Alaskans Institute. And I'm here with my sister, Watla Gidak, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Ngaitla, Wafal Gidak Hinudi ki ang Barbara Blake ki Atsatai Hinudi ki ang. Good evening, folks. My name is Wafal Gidak. My English name is Barbara Blake, and I work alongside Lagunai at First Alaskans Institute. And it's just a real honor and privilege to be able to host this amazing crew tonight. So super excited to be with everybody who's tuning in.
And for those of you who have been able to join us for the first and the second sessions, you know that we've been able to spend some time with Professor Graham Smith and Bentham Ohia already in the first two sessions, where we started talking about and learning about how our Maori relatives in Aotearoa have been able to once again take over their education system, so it really supports who they are as Maori people. And the reason that we were doing that, and the reason we're having these conversations, is because before us here in Alaska is an opportunity that is coming around compacting education with tribes. So working with the federal government, the state government, and our tribal governments here in Alaska, the opportunity is really for us to be able to center who we are as Native people and design an education system that actually supports our success, our ability to thrive as Native peoples, as distinct Native peoples, because of course, we are not a monolith as Alaska Natives. We are as different from one another in Alaska as we are from others, Indigenous groups from around the world. And so these learning systems and education systems have an opportunity to be structured in a way that really reflects who we are, as diverse as we are, so that our children can thrive, our families can thrive, our communities can thrive. So tonight, for our third installment, our third session, we have the benefit of some really special guests, and I have my heart in my throat talking about them because they're incredible human beings, but also they have committed themselves to continuing to work so hard to advance and protect our Native people in Alaska and for their people down in Aotearoa. So we are the beneficiaries of some really brilliant souls tonight. And I cannot say to each of you so much for being with us as we discuss the potential and the vision of what is possible for self-determination over our education and through a compacting process here in Alaska. And we've been honored to do this with our partner, the Alaska Federation of Natives. And with us as one of our guests tonight is Julie Kitka, the president of AFN. And Julie, I want to hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. And thank you to everybody that is joining on this live feed on that. We're deeply honored, Dr. Graham and Linda, your participation with us as we explore what transformational education can be and raise people's thinking of possibilities. What we are embarking at the Alaska Federation of Natives is taking one step into the whole idea of compacting tribal education. And we have begun laying the whole legal foundation while protecting our federal trust responsibility, as well as reviewing the state constitution, state laws and regulations and process. And our goal is to build a pathway for doing that. Where we're at right now is we've requested a oversight hearing by the Senate Indian Affairs Committee. The first field hearing occurs this coming week. Senator Murkowski is holding it on transformational education and innovation, which we're very grateful for. We'll have our second hearing in the state Senate House Committee this coming week on Wednesday on a substitute bill. It looks that we definitely have a path for getting both state legislation for a demonstration project, multiple demonstration projects, as well as support on the federal level. What I'm so grateful for Liz and First Alaskans' participation in that is we're working on the legal foundation, we're working on the legal path, but we invited her to explore possibilities of what we can do with this, because once we get this passed, and then we will get into the negotiation process with the state, and the more that we know what we can do with this historic opportunity, the further along that we're going to be at. And like I said, I can't thank them enough for hosting this, because getting that vision of where this can go is just as important as creating the legal pathway. Our strength within this, I'm not an educator, not a teacher or administrator on that, but we do have teams of lawyers that can analyze things, can analyze the federal trust responsibility. And we're very grateful that the Commissioner of Education, Michael Johnson, when he asked us to get involved, that he absolutely agreed that we would do everything we could to protect the federal trust responsibility and build on it. There has been some shirking of responsibility on the federal level, and we're not going to let them shirk that anymore. So it's full of opportunity. It is what we make of it. We've got to be smart and have great energy and tenacity and smart ideas, but we're going to be making progress. So it's pretty exciting. Thank you.
Julie. Well, we have this wonderful group of people here, so we want to make sure you all have a chance to meet them as well. And we're going to start with Pausauraq, if you're okay with that, and then we'll go to Renee and then Lisa.
Anakalotak uvanga Pausauraq utkayakaving Meow. I'm Pausauraq, named by my grandfather, Jana Harcharek, otherwise known as, excuse me, formerly with the North Slope Borough School District for nearly 20 years, and have always been engaged in education in some form or another, even back in Iñupiaq University days, when we had our own fully accredited four-year institution offering a variety of degrees, until the Alaska Commission on Post-Secondary Education closed the institution, citing issues with municipal government funding a private institution. And so my ties with education go back many years. I'm currently retired, but continue to have a very keen interest in goings on across the state, as well as nationally, as well as internationally, with our whānau in both Aotearoa and Ohana in Hawaii, and with fellow Inuit across the circumpolar north through involvement with the Inuit Circumpolar Council's Education Steering Committee. I'm a grandmother, great-grandmother, and who knew it would be so much fun when you reach that age. Thank you.
Galchish yek in khatsati ya khana wasa achtu yek ka achtla Julie achtu yek satini qone ya akhsai ya akh tla has yinanakh aya dekina khasati kha lukakh ati Tlingit ya akh ish has yinanakh Iñupiaq kha Sami English so yeah hakosti. Thank you all. It's so wonderful to be among you, especially such esteemed guests, and it's so nice to see my adopted mother, Julie. I'm always so happy when I see you. And my name is Renee Lance Twitchell. I'm here in Occoquan on the land of the people of the Little Lake, also known as Juneau, Alaska, named after some dude who happened to be here at some point, which is a common narrative. I teach the Tlingit language and also advocate for Indigenous languages across Alaska, including helping to draft legislation, uh, pushing for equal language status, and also trying to think about how could we mandate Indigenous languages at some levels, and then also sort of foster growth for our own peoples through access. And I'll have some more to say potentially about that later. And I've always been interested in compacting education because I think education historically and repeatedly and deliberately fails our people. And so because of that, we can do better. We can also have something that's more of a home-like atmosphere, a family atmosphere. And in Juneau, we see a lot of our Indigenous educators who have done that. But then at some point, our kids age out of these systems that are built for them, and then they have to go into these other systems that are not built for them. And we see them struggle and fail, and inward banishment is a absolute destructive reality that colonialism presents to us repeatedly. And I reject it. I embrace Indigenous languages and excellence. I also can continue to show high schoolers pictures of incredible civil rights leaders who are Alaska Native, and hardly any of them ever know who they are. And that is just a crime that our people are not given names and faces and histories, and that they can't even say hello in our language or an Alaska Native language from the place that they're from. So time for a lot of change. Happy to be here.
And I hope you can all hear me. Wali text. Lisa Wade, Suzette Len, Tautina Ashland, Night Danyana Kayak Silviada Dilakat Aida, Hadi, Night Danyana Kayak Wasna, Birdwood, Isa Kadi Jan. So hi everyone, I'm Lisa Wade, and I am having a little bit of internet Zoom problem. I'm calling in today from the unceded airwaves over Birdwood and Dene land. And unfortunately, I think I'm having some glitches. But I'm so glad to be with all of you. Tune in for the invitation. I'm Ahtna country, and I have the blessing and the pleasure of being the executive director for Chickaloon Village Traditional Council, and previously was the education director and health and social services director for our tribe, but specifically for the Haida tribal school, place near and dear to my heart. My daughter still attends, and today is her birthday, and she's here with me. So if you hear a little giggling in the background, that would be her. We're celebrating her Wali Neil Tanjan, Tefke, or let's see, Tefke, no, not Tefke. She is, thank you, Ukedi, 14 this year. Can't even believe it. Yeah, so thank you again for the invitation. So excited to be here to share, whatever I have to share about the Anida school.
Ms. Chish, how Pausauraq. I'm still trying to get that sound right. But I will get it. And was it Pausauraq? Pausauraq? Pausauraq?
Harcharek, yep.
Pausauraq. Puck for being with us, and Eek, my brother, Renee, Chish for being with us, and Lisa Chanan so much for being with us. We can't thank you folks enough for being with us tonight. We also have two really special guests with us as well, Professor Graham Smith and Professor Linda Smith, and it's no coincidence that they have the same last name. They're a dynamic duo from Aotearoa, and we've been able to have Professor Graham with us for the last 2 sessions, and tonight we also have the benefit of being with Linda as well. So we thank you guys so much. I'll hand it over to Graham so you can introduce yourself and speak, and then bring Linda on.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Liz and Barbara, for organising us all this evening. And to my friends and relatives that I see on the screen, greetings. Lovely to see you all again. And I think my first task would be just to summarise a little bit of where we've been. So we've had, this is the third of 3 sessions. And if I could summarize what this is about, for me, it's about the ideas that Alaska are confronting at the moment in terms of compacting education. And there's 2 parts to that. So one is the legislation and all of the bureaucratic stuff that surrounds that. The other part is the hearts and minds of the community at large across Alaska about letting people know and allowing them to see the potential benefits of an alternative and different option that is built around our own knowledge, language, and cultural interests at the one level, but also responds to the idea that our struggle is just not for our language, knowledge, and culture, but it's also for our social and economic well-being as well. And too often, and particularly in our neck of the woods, we've seen those 2 ideas as oppositional stances, and not really have seen the way in which they may, in fact, inform each other. So part of this exercise that we're engaged with, in my view, is educating ourselves. Sometimes that educating ourselves part extends to the idea of deconstructing and the way that we think in order to make space for ideas that we thought were impossible to hold on to ideas that we've been educated out of. And in other words, to really consider that our language, knowledge, and culture is an important part of our lives, that it does not have to be put aside to have a good education. So all of that is part of this discussion. We're on the 3rd part of this series, which is tonight really looking at the idea that not all the good ideas are outside of Alaska, that there are many good ideas and people who have led the way and within Alaska itself. And certainly by way of disclaimer, our position in speaking with you and sharing with you has been on that basis, that we've shared where we are up to in our struggle in New Zealand. We're not saying that this is what you should do in Alaska. We want you to have a look at what we're doing, and there may be some things that are useful. I certainly am of the view that I'm hopeful you won't make many of the mistakes that we made, and that you can learn from our experience from that point of view. I also think that you are in a better position in terms of having a lot more knowledge than we had when we first started off to develop alternative pathways and options in our education system. So the key thing from that where we're up to is, in my view, we need a coherence to what we're doing. And so sharing of the ideas and trying to bring together hearts and minds and win the imaginations of our own communities and people about the possibilities here is just as important as the changing the legislation and arguing the compact structures. In many ways, they've got to complement one another. So perhaps that's all I'll say, just by way of trying to situate where we're heading tonight, and we'll hear from different individuals about their experience of the struggle. And it is a struggle. It's not easy, and I think that sharing the experiences of others will be a helpful platform to building, in the end, I think, a coherent strategy about how this might unfold. So I'll hand off to Linda to correct me now.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings, everyone. Wonderful to see those of you whose faces I can see on the screen. And if I can't see you on the screen, it's still great to be able to engage with our relations in Alaska. And I just so miss, seeing you in person, and hopefully one day you can continue your travels down here and we can come up and visit you again. So absolutely honoured to be invited to participate. Our daughter Kapua is about to turn 40 this year. She's organised her own party to which we may or may not be invited. But the reason I say that is she's a child of the Kohanga Reo movement. She was born in 1982, I think, when Kohanga Reo was starting, and she went to Kohanga. And then around her and her group of friends, we started the development of Kura Kaupapa Māori, building a school movement around them. So our initiatives, of Kohanga Reo and Kura are now decades old in a sense. And who would have known, when she was little, that we would have this vibrant Māori language speaking community, that we would have some of the top music bands in New Zealand speaking Māori, singing in Māori, that we would have these huge festivals that are so competitive. If you've ever been to Matatini in New Zealand, where all the different kapahaka groups from all the different tribes compete, where we would have sports people, top sports people who speak real Māori, where we would have these kind of interesting young people who see the world differently from what we imagined when we started our school. We wanted a school, and for us it was around our self-determination, the revitalization of our language and culture, the right to express ourselves, the right to develop an education based on our own philosophies of education, the assertion that we had philosophies of education that was still valid and still relevant and could be used to produce a different kind of curriculum, different kind of pedagogies between teachers and learning, that we can reimagine what a classroom might be like, reimagine how children, what kind of children or what kind of adults our schools will produce. And we had this really strong belief that our schools would produce a different kind of person, a different kind of Māori person. At the very least, they would not be traumatized by racism and colonialism that they experienced in mainstream, but that in a way they will be expressions of our ancestors, that we'll be able to see something maybe, a little bit more pure in terms of how they will become as people. And, at the time, people thought we were dreaming. And I'm quite often asked, even now, whether, we imagine these things when we started out. We didn't imagine the specificity of them, but we did, and we did aspire for our schools to produce a different kind of child, at the very least. One who is grounded in our values, one who is fluent, actually bilingually, fluent in our language and in English, one who understood our stories, could perform our, many of our cultural kind of activities, but mostly ones for whom being Māori was natural, fabulous, just fantastic. You couldn't want to be anything else but Māori. To build a generation who's just plain proud, and they know no other thing than to be super proud of who they are. And you might think, well, those are really simple aims. And I think it's really important to keep the aims simple, because you have to articulate those aims to parents who won't necessarily understand what the big dream is. But now when we look back, and I've been talking to others who were in the kura movement, as we call it, when we started, and we say, we look at each other and go, did you imagine that our kids would turn out like this? Aren't they fabulous? Aren't they just like the most special people you can imagine? But at the same time, I've been teaching Māori students who come through the mainstream, what we call the mainstream school system, who don't come through our system. They're fabulous too, but they have a different journey. And it's a journey where they have to engage with the system and with, basically the dominance of the English language, English medium curriculum, and primarily in what we call a Pākehā system. And so, part of what we have to do at the same time, or we've had to do, is ensure that the standard state system does not harm those children, that it tries to foster their identity. And in a way, our kura system has done two main things. One in terms of producing our own graduate students who we're immensely proud of, and they do reflect many of our dreams. But we've also had to shine a mirror to the other part of the system to make sure that it is a safe and successful pathway for those children whose parents have chosen to keep them in that system. So we've had to be kind of intentional about that, because many of the parents who may have started with us in kura, for various reasons, didn't stay. They got anxious about things. They asked questions about when were they going to learn to read in English. That was when they were 5 years old and they couldn't even read in the Māori language. They had all these anxieties, and when they fell away, I think what was left was this group of very committed, staunch parents who just went on the journey. They were inspired enough by the dream. They knew the alternative was not great for their children, but they also knew that to realize this dream, they had to invest in it wholeheartedly. And we're now at the stage where, in a way, we're revisiting all of that, because our schools have hit the wall in terms of development. You know, we feel very let down by the government in terms of not facilitating the growth of our schools, because they're very successful academically. All right, they would have been killed off probably 15 years ago if it weren't for the fact that all the academic assessments in the secondary school part of it were coming out showing that our students were doing better in the kura kaupapa system than they were doing in the other system. And so, you know, hitting some of those academic goals and achievements does something to the sense of legitimacy of how our schools are working in terms of curriculum, teaching, standards, assessments. So I just want to leave it there. But yeah, it's like a 40-year journey. We've learned a lot. We're nowhere near realizing fully the dreams that we had. Bit by bit, they've been cut down, they've been undermined, they've been weakened, they've been threatened, you know, but the core of it's still tough because the parents have committed are amazing. And it relies so much on parents trusting our system with their children. So I'll leave it there, Liz.
Oh goodness, geez, how it's so amazing to be able to have you folks here with us, our relatives. The Pacific Ocean has only ever been a way that connects us, and we learn so much from you folks, and I know that is reciprocated with us as well. And it's something that, you know, when I first came down to Aotearoa, I remember being in one of the conferences, and a Maori professor was talking about his paper, and I don't even remember what it was. It was yeah, I can't even remember what the actual topic of it was, but he was talking about the education movement in New Zealand at the time, and he credited Oscar Coagley. And it stopped my breath. I didn't expect to hear that one of the founding providers of support and thought and thinking was one of our very own precious Alaska Native people. And it just made me feel like I was at home. And so to have you folks here with us, not in comparison, not in contrast to us in Alaska, but rather as our relatives who have been on your own journey and are at a different place in your journey than many of us. And that is not to negate the journey that we have here in Alaska that so many of our communities have actually embarked on for a couple decades now. And to know that is something that I want our Native people to understand too, because I think we were talking about this on one of the other sessions, and we were talking about how you can't be a prophet to your own people. And in Alaska, and I'm not just talking about our Alaska Native people at all, I'm just talking about statewide Alaska. at the same time that we're fiercely like pride ourselves on being independent and all about Alaska, we always rely on outside folks from down south to come in and tell us what's actually best for us. And even though we have these incredible Alaska Native educators and people who have dedicated careers, lives to doing this work and trying to advance this work, it has fallen to the dust, to the shelves. Our Alaska Native cultural education standards, for instance, are being used in other parts of the world, but aren't being used here in Alaska. And I think Bentham called it, he said, globally hot, locally not. And, you know, it's just so amazing to know that we have and always have had the ability to educate and care for our people and help them to thrive. So Ganesh Chish, Linda, and Graham for being with us tonight and holding us up as we go on this journey. Your pillars in our house. Ganesh Chish, Hopa. And I want to turn to our Alaska Native folks who are with us. And perhaps I'll reach over to my sister Lisa. Lisa, you folks have been running Yani Da'a, a tribal school, for a number of years now. And we'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Man, I was just counting in my head how long, and this is our 30th year that the Anand school has been around. My grandmother, our clan grandmother, Cathy Wade, actually, I've got an unstable connection. I'm going to try this. Back in 1992, because she was really tired of seeing all these young men ending up in the correctional facility about 2 miles from her house. And they were a lot of Alaska Native men disproportionately packing that place. And so they would get out of that place and come stay with us, and she'd try and get them back, you know, on a good path of life again. But the trauma was so deep and so embedded, and the racism was so filling them up that they lost a sense of who they were, and they would end up right back up there. And she got really discouraged by that, and she eventually said, we need to start when they're babies. We need to start filling them up with all the good things so they know who they are, where they come from, and the strengths of their people and their family. You know, I think that's one thing we all share in common here is the recognition that we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't survive in this place if they didn't have all the gifts of knowledge that were passed down for thousands of years that have kept us alive. That's education, right? You know, that's what's kept us here and kept us strong. And so she was one of our firstborn speakers, and luckily she never got taken away to a traditional school. So she kind of held on to her values and taught our moral stories, and started out a Saturday school with parents. And I'm trying to put this back on, see if it works. Started a Saturday school, and parents would bring their kids, and they would sit, and she would tell them stories and then do projects with them, like teaching them beading and telling them, you know, who they were and how to be in the world. And parents really liked that. They decided they wanted to start a school. And so it was all parent supported and led, and parents would teach. It wasn't taught to Western academics. It was a very, you know, organic start to something. And, you know, there was a lot of pushback on that, I think, from, you know, the Western educational system. You know, our school operates as a homeschool that is run through one of the local schools here, Matsu Central School District. And there is a tension, and I really relate to what Linda was saying, because there's been a tension for as long as I've been here and as long as I can recall of the notion of Western academics along with cultural education and learning. and prizing one over the other. And the threat of, if your kids don't academically, meet these achievement standards, these levels, then they're not doing well and they're failing. So, we've looked at this differently. We are trying to hold back this, I think we're trying to uphold the revitalization of our Ahtna language, where there are less than a handful of firstborn speakers left that speak this language. We're trying to build curriculum. We have an amazing team of people there, always have been, but right now we have, some wonderful teachers, Alaska Native teachers, and people really committed to not only the students, but also revitalizing and figuring out good ways to teach. So it has been an evolutionary process of 30 years. And I really liked what Linda said about, it's not easy. It's a very difficult thing to do. But in the end, what I'm reflecting on is the fact that, we've raised some amazing youth that have come out of the school that are now coming back to our community and serving as leaders. And one of them is, our chief's son, actually, is our first graduate of the school, has been working at the school for years, Daniel Harrison, and he's speaking the language and teaching the kids and taking care of the kids at the school. And another one I was thinking about today, we got a foot of snow out there, is Cathy Wade. He's come back to our community, and when he came back, he went out and got a degree in GIS informatics, like science. They always say we're not going to do well in science, right? That's going to be our challenge. It's going to be our weak point. He went out and got this degree in science, and he came back. And when he came back, what he said was, I want to be of service. I want to come back in and do what I need to do to be of service. So we're raising kids not only with good academics and achievement, but really well-grounded in values. And I think that's what I love most about our school, is that everything is taught through the central lens of our values. Every month, different values are shared and lessons are learned through that. And I think that's what's teaching those kids to be who they're supposed to be in the world and how to live in this world. And I think also, one of our other lessons was, this looming threat for kids that maybe weren't academically inclined in Western academics, but were really profoundly gifted in language and language learning and transmission. We came to this place where we said, you know what, that the Western education system is so prescriptive at telling you how to learn or what to learn, what you have to learn, but not focused so much on how you learn or how you learn best. And so is to teach in that traditional way of showing, so kids watch, and then they try, and then they teach. And I think that's, really been what's been helpful. And so we came to this place where we said, if the school district doesn't want to graduate some of our students because they don't perceive them as being successful in this area, and we perceive them as being successful, we are a federally recognized tribal government and can issue them their graduation certificate because we know what they've gifted in, what they've learned and how they've learned, and product failure the educational system and racism things. My daughter goes to the school.
We're losing your audio again.
We have open enrollment to everyone. Sorry, we have to everyone. We don't limit who gets to come to our school, and we encourage both neurodivergent learners to be in learning process with what you would consider typical learners. And so, while we honor IEP plans and things and try and meet and teach kids there, I think we really try our best to meet kids where they're at. So I don't want to take everybody's time. I'll leave it.
Gosh, geez, Lisa. 30 years. Congratulations. I can't believe 30 years already. That's wonderful. I know that Nakechwood and Kotzebue is around, I think they're probably around 24, 25 years now. So that's fantastic. That's so fantastic. I want to ask if Pausauraq or Renee, do you folks want to share some of your initial thoughts here? Stare down. It's a stare down.
I can go. I'd be happy to. Thank you so much, Lisa. It's Anand. It's wonderful to hear what you folks are doing up there. And to Graham and Linda Smith, you two, your words are like the soundtrack of my adult life. As soon as I found your writings, and as soon as I first met you, I met Graham when he spoke at the Alaska Native Studies Conference. Then I met you both when we brought you up for a retreat. And then we panicked because we thought we lost you folks in Walmart within the first 20 minutes. And so I thought they never trust us again, the preeminent scholars on decolonization, and we lose them in 20 minutes. But you folks were just having a little shop there, and I hope it was a wonderful visit with us. A lot of my thoughts revolve around just transforming education at every single conceivable level, from birth to a PhD, because colonial mechanisms are designed to destroy us, and they cannot be altered enough to have us be successful at an equitable level. So when I think about this stuff in the state of Alaska, I just look at the structures. I say, well, there's a state board of education. Is there a native board of education that has the same amount of power and influence that they do? There's a board of regents for higher education, but is there a board of tribal leaders who have the same power and influence that they do? Because these things will not be on our side in terms of looking at what we need to do. And coming back to what you folks were talking about, these systems do us harm. Our children kill themselves at levels that are absolutely abysmal and unacceptable. And that's the reason why we have to fight for change, and also refuse to have incremental change, but to have substantial change so that we can have multiple pathways to education. The Alaska Native Language Preservation and Advisory Council just did some work to estimate where our languages are. And it's stunning. If you're not ready to see it, or if you haven't been paying attention, there are 23 known Alaska Native languages historically. 3 of them are probably not being spoken today at a conversational level. I would say 10 of them probably have fewer than perhaps 20 speakers. There's a next group that has maybe up to 100 speakers. There's a smaller group that has maybe up to 500 speakers. And there's 3 that might have 1,000 or more. And so all of these languages are on a death march that was initiated by educational systems and churches in Alaska. And I just think back of this one session we had where an elder stood up and he said, why is it just us trying to pick up these pieces? Where are the ones who did this to us? What are they going to do? And so a relative of mine got in trouble one time, and they said, you broke the window, you fixed the window, you got to pay for it. And so that's what I say to the state and federal governments and to churches who just get to sit kind of quietly through this whole thing and not have a lot of accountability. And I really wish that they would make a bold move and step out in front of this and make public apologies for what they've done. And some of them have it at some levels, but to really step out and talk about the specific damages that they did when they prohibited our languages and when they convinced us or made us burn down our totem poles here and stop doing our cultural practices and stop raising our children the ways that we did. And so at some level, I have to think about all of this disjuncture and this rupture that education causes and just say, You don't know how to do something that fits everybody, and nobody does. And that's why there needs to be co-governance. About almost one out of every 4 people are Alaska Native. But we've been doing work in higher education to say, well, then why are 3% of the faculty Alaska Native? And what are we going to do? And even talking to some of my colleagues who are probably not ill-intentioned, but they're getting really upset because we're trying to radicalize the system because the system just clones itself. And what we're trying to do is these direct hires and these sort of cluster hires of Indigenous faculty members, because I came to the University of Alaska Southeast in 2011, and there was a group of us. And I'm the only one who's left from that group when I was here. And some of them retired out of frustration. Some of them took jobs in other places because they felt unsafe. Alaska declared a linguistic emergency years ago and has done really nothing since as far as a state. And so we continue to look to the legislature, who will say, well, we'd like to, but because of partisan politics, we can't do anything right now. But we'll still try to. Yeah, I always feel like there's something like we'd love to, but the budget, would love to, but the time, would love to, but the enemies. And so it's a whole bunch of standing around, drinking coffee and talking about what you'd like to do. And I say we got to drink that coffee to get fired up and to go change a bunch of systems and construct systems that work. Because I think another thing that we're up against is some of these colonial and capitalistic ideas that everything is so limited that it's always going to run out. There's not enough time to do this. There's not enough energy to do this. Oh, my kids are going crazy. There's not enough, and they should, because they're happy and having fun. But just sort of like coming back, like we want kids to come through these systems and to say a bilingual child is going to be stronger because they're not a genocider. Like no matter what side, no matter where they're coming from, what their ancestry is, they can come into a system and see like there was deliberate intentions to eliminate Indigenous languages. And coming back to what Dr. Michael Krauss said in 2009 is we stand to lose more Indigenous languages in North America in the next 60 years than in the entirety of contact with colonial nations. And so these are things that are not set in stone, though. These are things that we have control over as a collective population, but it's going to require a lot more Indigenous control of education, a co-governance at the highest levels, and also running our own schools and systems so that we can run things in our language all day, half the day, whatever it takes. I gotta see what these guys are asking me about. Sheesh, how direction.
I love it. I love it. I love having our kids around us. Wherever we are, our kids are. That's the best part of us as Native people. Pausauraq?
I was reminded as I was listening to folks talking, and kia ora, by the way, Hingangaroa, and your wife, Linda, whom I haven't had the pleasure of meeting in person, but it's so good to be here with you. I was reminded back when the North Slope Borough was first formed, and we had our own Board of Education finding in 1972, which meant that we supposedly had local control over education. And that, in my estimation, has never, ever really been the case. Yeah, we have board members that we elect, but there are mandates, rules, regulations that are promulgated by the state of Alaska that the district has to follow. And I don't need to go into detail as far as what those entail. But there was a particular board member who had issue with the then superintendent. This is back in the early to mid 70s, when she very rightly told this superintendent, you don't tell us what to do. We tell you what to do. And how many years later are we talking about? What are we, 50 years later now? 30, yeah, 50 years later. We're still caught in that same dilemma of having to argue that we have local control. I was very much reminded of that because when the North Slope Borough School District decided that we were going to actually take control over content back in the mid 2005, 2006, and actually began this endeavor to finally ask our people what's important. We asked our people, what does a well-rounded, well-educated 18-year-old need to know and be able to do? And we spent more than just a year. We spent several years working on articulating what that looked like. And so we reached a point where rather than say to the state, well, yeah, you've made it a requirement for us to meet all these state standards, rather than balk at that and say, well, here they go again, telling us what it is we're going to teach. We actually took matters into our own hands and said, well, not only are we going to meet state standards, but we are also going to meet standards that we set ourselves as a people. And that was very powerful. However, systems being what they are, haven't been very conducive to full implementation. In other words, yeah, we've articulated what this well-educated, grounded 18-year-old looks like. However, there have been and continue to be obstacles that Lance very well articulated, that we continue to have to go through. However, I think that the will of the people, by the mere fact that they came together to articulate what it is our children should know and be able to do, have made a very, very profound statement that, yes, finally our own school district asked us what was important, and we said what it is. And so where we have faltered is in follow through, and I hope that through these continued discussions that we can continue to have conversation around how to get beyond that. That's immediately what came to mind. I just really admire the work, Lisa, that you have done. That is phenomenal work, as is the example that Nikai Chuat. I really admire the work that you and your people have done there. So thank you.
Pausauraq. So you bring up a really good point, which is around the structure, the systemic structure that's needed to be able to really achieve that vision of what it is that we want for our peoples, and the education system that will support their full development as thriving Native peoples. And one of the things we heard in the last two sessions was around kind of the legislative effort that was undertaken to create the support from that the schools started, right? The schools just started in Aotearoa, and then the legislation followed. And then the schools just started in the available buildings. And here in Alaska, we're at a little bit of a different place because all of our villages have schools now, at least, for the most part, K through 12. Many have Head Start programs. All of them, for the most part, with a few exceptions, are run by local school boards who are elected, and they are regulated by the state of Alaska's education system. And so we're at a different place. So we have a different opportunity, but it does build off of what you folks have done in Aotearoa and what some of the examples have already been shared of that has been done in Alaska. And Julie, earlier you said that you're creating and working on the legislative and the legal side to be able to build a structure that could really support the evolution of a tribal education system. And I'm wondering if maybe you could share your thinking. You had described it as demonstration programs. Maybe you could share a little bit of your thinking around the structure part, and then we can get into a little bit of visioning and dreaming together.
And before talking about structures on that, I do want to respond, Professor Twitchell, and some of your comments on that, and also Jana's comments on that. When I look at education and I look at where we're at this point in time, I think back to our land claims. It has been very recent that we had our land claim settlement with the Congress. It's just been a mere 50 years. And for many decades after that, a lot of our leadership was focused. 110% of their time and their whole life's work was into implementing our land claims. And the main reason was because of Congress's decision to put our land in for-profit corporations. And you had all your eggs in one basket. You sank or swim. You either were able to make these corporations be successful, or you risk losing all your land and your assets. So an incredible amount of leadership, time and energy and sweat and tears went into the structures of our land claim settlement, both in the village and the regional. At the same time, you're seeing development in the healthcare area. And I use our tribal compacting and health corporations as example of just proof that going through a whole pandemic, our tribal health system was strong and viable and got us through this pandemic, got us to the point of being high on the priority list for vaccines, on the priority list of getting personal protective equipment at a time when you had supply chains breakdowns and our villages were at the end of the supply chain. Every step of the way, you saw the strength that was baked into the system, that compacting in healthcare helped bake that in. And I just think that as we reflected on our land claims and the time and effort that we've been in, and our focus this last year in convention on unfinished business, education is unfinished business to us here in Alaska, as well as our hunting and fishing rights is unfinished business. We have many things that still require our full attention and efforts into it. And I just think we're just at a historic time in Alaska, in the Native community, to make a leap forward on education. And we're going to do everything that we can to open that door. Are we educators? No. But do we believe that it's all about expanding the imagination of our people to accomplish anything we set our minds to? That's what we believe in. And we know that there's been a lot of things our educators have done and have tried to beat us over the head to say, help us on this or do this and stuff. But we had things that we needed to do. I'm just saying right now for our educators, the time is now for you to go and jump right into this. So that's it. I was going to say, Liz, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to choose Julie. Pausauraq, I see you came off mute. Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I was reminded at the time that we were dreaming up what it was going to look like for the North Slope Borough School District to not exclude the identity of our children when they walk into the building by reflecting them in the curriculum and in course content. I was reminded of how one of our board members made a very, very profound statement. It was very profound to me at the time, and it continues to be profound for me. She said that we have always let others define what success means for our students. It's not up to others to define what that is. It's up to us. And so, Julie, I really appreciate your comments because it just totally reminded me of that. We define what success looks like for our students, for our kids, for our people.
Can I add on to that too? I love what you just said because I'm right there with you. And I also think we have to, really recognize what Indigenous wisdom brings to education. We wait to certify teachers. We wait to certify and legitimize teachers that have been teaching us lessons our entire lives, that have so many things to offer. And they don't have that piece of paper that tells us they're an educator. And I think that's something, it's not only that we get to determine what's important for our communities to learn and value for success, but also we get to determine who those educators are, who those wisdom keepers are. We have profound people that have been so committed, Carrie Shaganoff, Sandra Shaganoff, to our language revitalization efforts, and they're 100% legitimate. They didn't need that piece of paper to tell us they're committed to these efforts of language and education and teaching.
I had the pleasure of visiting Sinte Gleshka, which is on the Rosebud Reservation. It's their university system. And I was just totally amazed because they have courses like philosophy of Lakota education, Lakota astronomy, Lakota philosophy. It was just mind-blowing. And when Lance, I appreciate your comments about the post-secondary education system here in Alaska. We have no semblance of that. And I can see how perhaps co-management style might get us there. Because obviously we haven't been able to get there any other way. But the possibilities are just so limitless. So finding a place to start, I think for a lot of people is very overwhelming. And so if we can sort of figure out how to make it less overwhelming and lead people to a place where they're comfortable not looking to others for the answer, because we have the answers. We've carried that knowledge with us from our ancestors for years and years, but we have to get our people in a place where they're comfortable with that.
Yeah, Iñupiaq, Pausauraq. Linda.
I think you've all mentioned some really critical aspects of what's important, I think, when we think of the word education, or, for us Māori education, that or the system, because you've mentioned teacher education, really critical to control initial teacher education, professional development, curriculum, the administration of schooling systems, leadership training, financials, buildings, infrastructure, IT, those things. When we first started, it was all about getting a building, getting a teacher and like going, okay, off you go. And then we realized quite early that actually we needed to decolonize our own teachers because they were just teaching the same old in the Māori language. And that's when we came to realize, no, we don't want our language just to be the medium of delivery of the same old curriculum or value system, that we had to redesign that. And then that got us into developing, or Tuki Nepe developed the initial teacher education program, which she led. It's, a recognized qualification. And because many of the teachers weren't fluent in the language, obviously that meant they had to have immersion language for early teachers to get them prepared to go into the classroom. So when we're thinking of the system, it's huge. And when you get into the secondary part of it, and I think Renee, you mentioned that too, it's the whole system, because there's this developmental idea as, okay, we'll start them when they're little in early childhood, and then they'll be ready and they can go into the system and they'll survive. But the truth is they don't. So then you have to invest in the next level. And then you think, oh, well, then they can go into secondary school system and they'll thrive, but they don't. All the way up to PhD. And so a lot of the programs are based on this premise that if they're successful at this level, it guarantees success at the next level without intervention, without change. So now we're examining PhDs written in Māori language. But that wasn't, that wasn't in our actual imagination. But when you think about why not, because that comes naturally. If they're highly literate in the Māori language, they're going to want to produce their work in the Māori language. So I just think understanding the system part is really important, the governance system, the relationships and how those are instilled with the values, the languages that you want to embed. Because I think what we've learned is at every level, there was a new fight. At every level, because we never really controlled at the top. And even now there's a big argument going on about whether we should have a Māori education authority. We're getting a Māori health authority, and that's based very much on the success of the Alaska model. But in education, where we have a Minister of Education who is Māori and who is a former principal, who is absolutely against us having a Māori education authority. So it does your head in, but it's true. We're in this sort of at every step, we've had to create the next level and the next level. So now that we're sort of almost there, and even then assessments, that's another system. And we look back, at where we started, we didn't dream big enough about the system. We kind of knew we had to sort of change it, but we were too busy looking down, trying to do everything ourselves, and we had no one advocating for us at other levels too. So for Alaska First Nations to be there beside you, that's something we didn't have with our tribes, because they were busy simultaneously going through their treaty negotiations. So everything was out of whack in terms of, the synchronicity of a lot of our initiatives. They are asynchronous. And so everyone is in their lane, trying to move forward, but the lanes don't necessarily merge to support each other until you're nearly at the end. So that was just the comment I wanted to make about system stuff, because I think your comments, all of your comments are really pertinent to that.
Yeah, so I'd like to just follow that commentary and make this observation that we have never had the opportunity to build a significant compact with government. I don't know what that looks like, so I'm sort of guessing what I would like it to look like from my perspective, but I think Linda's correct in saying that we really need to get the overarching structure right, as well as the hand-to-hand every day in the classroom change, where most of us are located. And so the superstructure of the system, we also need to control. And so my view of a compact then would be that somehow we need a infrastructure that enables us to make the decisions for ourselves around funding allocation, around credentialing, and the accountabilities, I guess, of the alternative or schools that we're developing. I will say again that one of the things that because part of this is, I can see the policy argument of how you convince the state to actually enter into this process. And so I think from my point of view, we've got to be able to start talking about the socio and economic well-being of our communities as much as our language, knowledge and culture revitalization. And that, in a sense, there's an opportunity cost and a saving, really, if we can get people who are healthy and who are committed to transforming themselves, then that's a big step forward. So the self-development, engaged in meaningful self-development. So approaching the compact, and as I say, we have not had that opportunity in New Zealand, but and I'm sort of just thinking about that idea, is that I think we need to have or those who go to the table need to have a comprehensive plan about the self-development and the view and the potential of where this needs to provide the support to an enabling vision and that vision, at least needs to speak to language, knowledge and culture maintenance. It probably needs to speak to rural in Alaska, rural communities, quite specifically. And it also needs to speak to more the socio-economic needs of Indigenous communities, because like most Indigenous communities around the Pacific Rim, we suffer from high and disproportionate levels of social and economic marginalization, underdevelopment, whichever way you want to put that. So and I think back to Iñupiaq Edwardson and the whole issue on the North Slope of the revitalization of whaling and the traditional elements. It can be done to change the act to enable some of our traditional elements to continue. And I think that's wonderful. We're in the throes actually of just talking about whales here in New Zealand. I'm trying to share all the information about the North Slope, what they did to our people here. Not that we're hunting them, because they're my relatives, actually. I would note that when I was up in the North Slope, that they had one of their best weeks ever in getting whales. And I accused them of fishing out my relatives who'd come to see me. but you know, just that example to me, and the way in which the accommodation was made to enable that to continue as a tradition, is the sort of thing, you know, that the compact needs to I think really clearly about making sure that you've got that native community or people. I won't say communities, because it probably needs to be situated at a community level, ought to have the say over what counts, what needs to be funded. It probably needs to have a sequestered funding, if that's possible, to allocate. And so one of the things about today's session is that, again, I'll say it, is that we're talking to some people, and they're not all at the table, but who are examples of actually innovation that's going on in communities, and that's out there. And so the thing is, you know, how do we support the existing innovation as much as we're going after developing new ideas? Because actually the existing innovations are well down the track. So I'd also make this as, it's not a throwaway comment. It's quite serious that not all the colonizers are pink. And by that I mean that some of them are beige and brown. And so there's a need to understand that context in which we're working. Some are not colonizing, they're just on a different pathway, and that's fine. So we're talking about options in the system. The options that already exist, which people want to access, that's fine, they're already there. But the options that are missing are the ones that we've been talking about, that accent our language, knowledge, and culture, that are dedicated to building our community and our self-development, our determining systems. So and in that sense, it's not either or, it's and. So so that compact system needs to support those the ones that have been missing out in the opportunities to build alternative ways of success. Because in the end, this circles round to success. That's all I'll say. I know that's a bit provocative, but I'm really just holding out for the compact. Actually, Julie, I think it's a new opportunity that we haven't seen elsewhere. I know that there was one in Micronesia, but it was a post-war compact for the cost of the war on those different islands in Micronesia, but and that has had a few tricky edges to it, actually, because it was a totally different. It wasn't about an Indigenous education. It was about the importation of the American education into the islands. So different form of compact, but that's the only one I know about that's out there.
Well, you know, Graham, what's also different about right now is the state of Alaska, the Commissioner of Education wants to do this. So
Yes.
he's not fighting us on, he wants to do it. So it's a matter of us, he's opening the door and we need to walk through that really smart. But the other thing that's happening on the national level is we have an unprecedented amount of federal resources that the administration has pushed out. I mean, just on infrastructure alone, there's $13 billion targeted to Native Americans for their infrastructure. We have never in our lifetime seen that much money being targeted for Native Americans. And we just need to make sure with all these resources that are being pushed out, that these models of compacting, and as you mentioned, the systems on that, but it gets resourced. I mean, we have a basic thing on the national level to get rid of the prohibition for money going into the facilities of schools. So that needs to disappear, that prohibition, with all these resources out there. So that's why the timing is so right to be doing it now. Unprecedented activity at the federal level, a warm and opening commissioner that's opening the door, and it's a matter of us walking through. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lance, I'll just make one quick point. So they, on the back of our revolution, if I can use that word, or the transforming of our systems, is that people, parents generally have become more committed to the potential of education to change their lives. We had a whole generation, who after the war, with urbanization, a whole heap of protest initiatives and so on, who were totally disillusioned with schooling, who didn't see any positive things about it at all. But since we've had our alternative opportunities, and it hasn't been for everyone, it's been a whole different tone across the country. And most of our news people now on television will use Māori language. One of the students I taught, I shared this the other day, was featured on CNN. So she's a kura kaupapa Māori young broadcaster who reads the main news in New Zealand, and she has a moko on her chin. And she's, and she came through the alternative schooling system. We've got heaps of examples of success through that. So the tone, it impacts, if you like, the whole idea of, and I know the political connotations around the use of this word, but I can't think of a better word just now. Citizenship settlement, of a buy-in to a notion of citizen, and that surely has to be a big concern to, the Alaskan government and to the federal government, of how to get people, a population, much happier and willing to buy into a notion of collectivity around the national good.
Well, Lance, you were jumping in.
Yeah, sheesh. I wanted to sort of talk about like potential structures that we can envision, and what we're trying to do at the University of Alaska Southeast to help pave the way for some of these new realities. Next year, we're going to propose a Master of Arts in Teaching Indigenous Languages so that we can produce teachers who are ready. Like if they come in with certain levels of fluency, we will focus on preparing them to be language teachers. And so one of the things that we're trying to now forge is a pathway through the state of Alaska to have them be fully licensed and certified teachers. I think that then opens the door to say, we need to have an Alaska Native language teacher in every school in Alaska. Then I think that opens the door to say, we need to adjust the graduation standards so that every student needs to take 1 semester of an Alaska Native language. Because not knowing anything is just, if Alaska's motto is north to the future, 1, we already live here, so we don't have to go north, and 2, like you're living in the past by not including Indigenous languages. You're just being some outdated colonizer. But then the other thing that we're trying to do is to develop a method for Alaska Native people to learn their Indigenous languages without having to pay for them. And I think we're getting close to figuring that out here at UAS. We're hoping it becomes a model for other universities in Alaska. And then at a statewide level, what I've really been advocating for is a College of Alaska Native Languages so that we can kind of consolidate our programs, and so that I wouldn't have to really focus on, like arts and sciences and other things that are very needed in a university, but I would actually gain a lot more by just working with other Indigenous language teachers and Indigenous content teachers. And so that we can sort of reach across some of those boundaries that are just academic silos, which work for some, but don't work for a lot of Indigenous content, because we're transdisciplinary and sometimes anti-disciplinary in nature. And then I think another thing would be an Alaska Native Language Schools Consortium, which would be a statewide entity that functions essentially as a school board for all Alaska Native language schools and programs, so that they can also have some statewide support, some just resource building, leaning on each other as we look forward and try to do this. We've been trying to construct an immersion school in Juneau for at least 20 years. And it's been impossible because we have to get approval from the school board, and they will not approve it. There was a time, there was so much public support. There was a room packed full of people excited about this. And from what I wasn't there, but from what I heard, they said, okay, the school board will now hear about a Tlingit language immersion school, and moving on. And like didn't even put it legitimately onto the agenda. And so as we started talking more and more, and as I started talking more about a Tlingit immersion school here in Juneau, there was a school board member who talked to me and who was very interested in the idea, was the only one that I saw from the school board at the time who would come to these presentations about the idea. But she said, well, I'm really concerned about segregation. And I said, well, it's a language school. It's not a race school. It's if we have Tlingit who want to send their kids here to learn with us, that's fabulous. And if other schools in the area want to come and spend some time with us and be in this immersion environment, they'll learn so much. So the other sort of thing that we've been talking about, because we know we have an awful lot of work to do, is an Alaska Native University. So the University of Alaska consists of University of Alaska, Fairbanks, Anchorage, and Southeast. And I think there needs to be a fourth one, which is the Alaska Native University, which sort of transcends those boundaries again. And so that we can have, I just don't see us having a chancellor sometime soon who's Alaska Native, because just recently we had someone who was perfect, who was qualified, she was wonderful for the position, and they chose an unqualified white male based on his political, how familiar he is with certain folks. And just seeing that is just, for me, it just affirms that we're still in this system of white supremacy in terms of who gets to be at the top. And we're very lucky here at Southeast Alaska because we have a chancellor and we have now a dean who are on board with some of these ideas, and they hear us and they make bold moves, and they make other people upset, because the thing that we hear as well is some of our white faculty will say, well, what you guys are doing is really exclusive. But what's really wild is we've been sending them every invitation we can. Like, come, we'll feed you. We'll tell you stories. We'll love you up, and we'll pat you on the back, and we'll say how cool you are. But then they're still saying we're being exclusive. But it's them not coming because they're feeling this discomfort, because education is beginning to shift and it's beginning to become something that has multiple foundational points. And that other foundational point is going to be Indigenous knowledges. And we're going to erase some of these boundaries between ecological knowledge and science and artifact and art and all these different ways, stories and literature, that they code that Indigenous is not this higher level thing. And we're going to sort of put those things on blast. But the other thing we're trying to sort of figure out is, like, if you have people who are anti-Indigenous in their modalities of thinking, like we got to get them out of we got to get them out of the system as well, because we have people who are teachers and administrators and professors who are anti-Indigenous, and you can hear it when they say this, and they are racist in their viewpoints, and they have the power to say these things, and it's largely unchecked. And so those are some things that we're sort of trying to push forward, is trying to construct these other entities. And it's a resource question. As we said, let's make all our classes free for languages. And then someone said, well, are you ready? What if you have 200 people who come and want to learn? I said, well, no, we're not ready, but we've been training for this our whole lives. And that's the question is, let's just go for it. I don't know. There's no question. Just do it and see what happens, because I think it's always the hegemony that makes you think like, you can't do this. You're not ready. You just got to wait. If only this, if only that. But really, there's all these things that are just in the back of your mind telling you you're going to do something wrong and you're not going to succeed. But I think that that's the colonization just trying to sort of maintain its grapple over keeping your people truly out from the center of these systems.
Sheesh. Yes. We need all of these structures. We need all of these structures to be led by our Native people and to design them. And, you know, Linda, something that you said earlier too, which kind of reminds me, based off of Hune's comments, was around when you guys started, your vision was like here, and now you're thinking about like the superstructure. I think that was Graham's word of, you know, the system that needs to actually be put in place for these things to work. And right now we're at this place where the potential for a compacting process is aligning, and AFN as the lead in this area has been working on kind of that policy and that legal pathway. Once that's in place, what are our opportunities? What is our tribal governance going to look like over an education system? What is a tribal education system going to look like? You know, we think about at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, or actually let me go a little higher than that, Alaska Native Tribal Health System. The system itself came about because of this pathway towards demonstration programs and the mechanism within the law that was allowed for a demonstration program to really start to develop, and then to be kind of building off of that and opening it up to more of the tribes as they wanted to participate in the compact through their tribal health consortiums. So when we think about when we get there, when AFN and the Department of Education and Early Development and the partners on the federal side are able to get those doors to open, we're going to have a structure, because our tribes, as we know, are really committed to the well-being of our people and have been able to delegate their authority to a number of different types of organizational structures, so that those structures can take on and become the experts in that area. When we look at the tribal health system, we look at all of the tribal health organizations. We don't have that set up yet for education. And so people have to have a little bit of some kind of handle. What does it look like? What does that governance and operations look like for a school, a tribal school? What does it look like for a tribal school district? I'll just use a term from the way it's currently set up. But as you envision what is possible here, and we dream about being able to actually see this come to fruition, and we're talking about, you know, pre-K through PhD, like Linda said, to be able to dream to see these children that are born all the way through their education journey. So as we shift a little bit into thinking about, okay, what does that governance system really look like for a tribally compacted school or school district? And you know, how does it operate? Just some, like, how do we see that happening?
Well, I start to think of schools that I've seen in Hawaii, where the very foundation of the school can come from an Indigenous sense of knowing. So just in terms of there was no bell, there was no central intercom system. They start by like blowing into this conch shell and just sort of like gathering and singing in the morning and chanting and having like a structure that, like, if you were there and you saw it, you would say, okay, this is not a school that I know, unless you've seen it before, right? And so folks from Aotearoa would also know these things, right? And so one is it reflects the cultural living and the values and the ways of life of the people that it serves and represents and comes from. I think also you have a lot of flexibility in terms of developing your own school board. We were looking at a charter school model, although we ended up sort of ditching the idea for a while because only one person out of all the school board members, not the current ones right now, but this is going back 6-7 years ago, every school board member, every administrator, only one person ever said that they would support the idea. And so the problem we were having, and that I shifted my focus from the way it exists, where you have to ask the school board for permission to divide their pie, right? It's just like someone who's used to getting all the meals, and you say, hey, would you be willing to share those meals if we do something different because you can't meet our needs? And I think the system is set up so that they can easily say no. And there's 100 ways they could say no. And so we need something different, that we don't have to ask permission from a system that's failing us to do our own thing. So we need to develop a bodies, whatever we want to call it. I think it's a statewide Alaska Native Language Schools district that basically they work and they just look at different communities and say, this community is ready. They're ready. And the compacting model as well, it's an additive model because you could bring in additional funding and it's not going to take away, because you're also going to get state funding as well to be running as a school. And so when you combine those, you would have a funding structure in place. There's going to be questions about facilities. There's going to be questions about a number of different things. But those are some things like in our region where we would look at, like, we need to either construct something or start small and build it, because if we wanted to, it's not like we're going to open a K through 12 school next year. Like, we would want to kind of build it one grade at a time as we continue to build for what we have in our vision, is start building it up. So you have a kindergarten teacher, first, second, third, and you just start building it up all the way up. So maybe there's someone who starts as the first grade teacher, ends up becoming, a high school teacher, but they've got to be that while we continue to build this thing up. And we've seen models. We work closely with our relatives just right across the ocean, and we're connected now through Zoom and everything else. And we can have them guide us as we take this journey. It's not a new journey. We see people doing it. We see the success rates. Some of these schools have 20-year records of 100% graduation. And you can't argue against that.
Yeah, we're gonna cheers. Pausauraq, were you gonna say something?
I saw a question relating to, how do we incorporate into content our ways of thinking, our ways of hunting, the animals that occur in our environment? And that's what I remember of the question that I read as I picked it up. I think you saw that one. And I'd just like to share that given the, I'll just put it this way, the colonial structure of the North Slope Borough School District as it currently exists as an arm of the state of Alaska through the formation of the North Slope Borough, we were able to take control, maybe not 100%, but we were able to finally assert that we are going to teach our own history. We are going to teach the things that our people said we need to be teaching in order to produce well-grounded, well-educated 18-year-olds. So for the person who asked that question, there is a model in place through the Iñupiaq Learning Framework at the North Slope Borough School District, and it was done at the community level with elders from across the communities, with stakeholder, what are called stakeholder meetings, just input from a wide variety of the community, and the whole idea behind that was to begin building some sense of trust between the community and the school. And when the district was able to bring back to the communities some of the things or the products of what those discussions entailed in terms of materials for teachers to use to teach about the history of the area, for example, the sense of relief, profound relief in the form of tears falling down people's faces. I remember in Point Lay, for example. Finally, the North Slope Borough School District is hearing what we're saying. So there is a model to make that happen. And I just wanted to share that for the person who asked that question.
I would also just build on Lance's point that he was making about the a sort of a centralized sort of over system, and just say that our experience has been that actually communities and tribes want their own autonomy. So our collective element is a philosophy. So the Kurukopapa Māori schools have a philosophy, and there's certain schools that belong to that philosophy. There are other schools that are called Kura Iwi, or they're tribal schools and represent the tribal interests of that tribal area, and they operate. But the principles at the center are sort of the same thing, that every child is, comfortable in the learning environment, that they have access to the things that they need, So I don't want to say governing entity, but the facilitating entity is an enabling legislation for these different expressions that belong to the community of interest. So, the Iñupiaq, not everyone's going to teach whaling in their curriculum, for example. But, I would imagine that's important in some communities, and there we have different customs and so on that belong to that come out of our community environment. So you need to be able to respond to this diversity of curriculum and of need, and which builds, if you like, the community interest. But at the same time, it's mediating the superstructure, if you like, or the compact is mediating the state interest that would otherwise stifle that. So in other words, I'm saying that they create an enabling legislation and funding and the power, really, to for that to occur. And I don't know, but I don't think we're developing a homogenized sort of system across the whole of Alaska would work. It certainly wouldn't work in New Zealand. And I don't think that's what you meant anyway, Lance, but I'm just sort of expanding that, making that point.
Linda, I see your hand up.
You won't have all the answers for everything you need at the get-go. There's something empowering about making it up. And just remember, the Western curriculum was made up. They made it up as they went. They made up the content. They made up the justification. It's taken hundreds of years to develop philosophies of teaching and learning. It's taken hundreds of scientists to kind of create assessment strategies, and half of them are rubbish. You know, part of being self-determining is the confidence to know that you can do it, and that when you're confronted with it, you figure it out, you create it, you design it, you produce it, you collaborate to get others to do it, because it's going to be novel. And I think there are some aspects where you have to kind of scaffold the system onto something you know, even though you might want something that's not like anything that currently exists. In order to communicate to people, you do need this sort of scaffolding language, for example, curriculum. And when we started, you know, people go, what's your curriculum going to be? And I think Graham always said, well, we'll just conform with the national guidelines. No, which we didn't know what the national guidelines were, but it seemed to be a good throwaway statement to keep, because we didn't really know what the curriculum was. We had to design it, you know, and then it was like, well, what about your teachers? And we'd say, yes, well, we're going to decolonize them. But we didn't really have a program for that either. The key things we had was that Te Aho Matua, the philosophy, which was really written in 10 days flat, is the simplest expression, but it is a very real statement of values that these schools live by. And I know, you know, teaching students who've graduated out of Kura Kaupapa Māori, they know the value system really well. They're immersed in it. It is imbued in everything, curriculum, pedagogy, but also things like how they get disciplined. You know, Te Aho Matua is the guide for the processes, the cultural protocols, the principles of, you know, of enhancing the mana, the prestige of the individual, you know, central to even a disciplinary process. The development of policies, you know, when we started, we just had a few, but then we begged, borrowed, adapted, and then had to invent whole new policies for what we needed. And some of the reasons we had to invent policies is because we got unanticipated problems. So, for example, you know, we were extended whānau or extended families. Well, some parents thought they could send all their children to school. So some of them shouldn't, you know, they were under 5. So really, legally, they couldn't be in the school. So we had to have a policy to say, sorry, you can only send those who, you know, and bit by bit, we built up a policy. You talked about the conch shell. Well, at one of our kura, the parents really wanted a bell. And like it did our head in when we asked, why do you want a bell, for goodness sake? They wanted to know when the school day finished so they could collect their children. And so for many of the parents, they wanted something that kind of was like the system, that it had some familiar bits to it, that there was a regular lunchtime, that there was a regular break, that there was regular kind of activities that they could recognize. But, you know, a lot of that, we were literally making it up as we went on an everyday basis. And we know our parents found that incredibly empowering, because for some reason they thought, you know, the curriculum just sort of came down from the heavens. And when they realized they could actually help produce a curriculum, you know, it was like, wow, can we really do this? Can we put this in and that in? It did excite them.
Wow. Well, I know we're getting close to wrap up, so I got two thoughts. One is I saw a segregated school, and so I barely made it through high school. Julie had a lot to do with that. My mother had a lot to do with that, getting me through there. But I think the students who chose not to be assimilated just left. And so that was the segregation for us, was you either assimilate or you fail or you get kicked out. So it's already segregated for us. It's a place where we truly don't belong. And we hear that at the university as well, where students will say, I got to be myself or succeed. I can't do both. And then as we talked more about building our own schools, the other thing I want to push back on is perceived stereotypes. As someone who probably had my position before me, although it was anthropology before it was Indigenous studies. So he was an anthropologist. He had written books about our people. He was a Tlingit, he's a white man. And he sent me an email one time and he said, I really like this idea of an immersion school, of you running your own schools, but I just have to wonder, like, how are these kids going to be ready for the real world? How are they going to be ready for the modern world? So, I wrote him back. I said, well, the thing about us is we're really real and we're really modern. And these are ideas that are also just where you're trying to freeze Indigenous peoples in a particular time. What the black and white photos that you see is what you think we are. And there's a whole lot more than that. And there's so many different folks who came to our lands and just wrote us off as their language is primitive. And I always think, boy, if I found like one of those things where they give you 3 wishes, I'd waste one of them. I'd be like, resurrect that person, so I put him in my advanced language class and just show them how difficult this stuff is. Then I'd only have 2 left, and I have to build the school and then do something nice for my kids because I spend too much time away from them. But it's always interesting thinking of trying to get these things to happen and trying to just sort of push and push and push. But a lot of times I think we're going to have to figure out, like, we're just going to have to go over some people, or we're just going to have to blaze the way. Cheesh.
Yeah, goodness, geez, how so we are at 9 o'clock on a Friday night here in Alaska, which is 7 o'clock your time down in Aotearoa, I think. And I do not want to stop. We went for a couple hours with Graham the first time, and then again with Graham and Bentham the second time, and we just kept going and going because this stuff is so critical and so important. And it's such a blessing to have all of you here with your knowledge, with your critical questions, with your understanding of the way this has worked for relatives in Aotearoa, as well as where we are at now in Alaska and the potential for what is coming. And it feels crucial. It feels like we don't have enough time because it's taken so long to be where we are now. And we're still in the situation where our children are not thriving, as Renee was just saying. And a few years ago, the current Commissioner of Education, Michael Johnson for the state of Alaska, held an education outreach summit. I want to say it was like 2018, 2017, something like that. And essentially said it himself, that the system is failing our Alaska Native students and failing our Alaska students. And we need something innovative, and had called together people from across the state to come forward with innovative ideas, not a full detail of exactly here's the answer and here's what you need to do, but rather what is the transformative idea. And the transformative idea that came from one of the committees was compacting public education with tribes. And so this is something that is a pathway that's being created for something that our ancestors and elders and many of our Alaska Native educators trained in the Western way, yes, but also our Alaska Native educators who are culture bearers, who are language leaders, who are providers out on the land. They've been calling for this too for decades and decades. So it's super exciting to be at this point. And to have, I want to say, and Julie, your excitement about the potential of transformation at this time, because of the way the pandemic has positioned us across the world to be ready to transform, is not only a lightning striking moment, but also an energy that can carry us forward. And that's what we need to get us into that space we've been working so hard for our people have been working so hard for decades. So I just want to say hawa so much to each of you. And if you want to say good night and share any final closing thoughts, that would be really wonderful as well. Grant?
Yes, so let me sum up what I've been thinking. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to share with you. I'm really interested in the whole notion of compacting. As I said, something new that we don't know anything about. We haven't tried that, and I'm really interested to see the potential that this might have in making a real difference to our Indigenous educating. Just the two key points that I think that we need to just keep in mind all the time, that is the potential of education. Education is both our illness and our medicine. And it's that duality that we need to keep in mind. So it's got the potential to transform our lives, even though we may be critical of what's happening to us. And the other point is that, within all of this, the reason why it's important to have these sorts of discussions is that we need to accurately understand what is going wrong and how it's going wrong if we're going to come up with accurate interventions and answers. So these are all, and we need everyone to contribute. So at the very start of this this broadcast, I did say that it was great to hear those who are actually got blisters on their hands already from doing some of this stuff, to share their experience and to build on that experience, and hopefully to provide the additional elements that they might need to continue on to make the difference in their communities. And finally, I need to say to all of those people who've been writing to me on my email from villages and so on, I didn't realize they had such a big following out there. Most of well, actually, everything's been complimentary, but thank you very much. I will try and respond to everybody, but and again, I think that that people have some wonderful ideas, and there's a sense of hope that I can read in those emails, and that something might be genuinely going to happen in terms of change. And so that's it from me. So thank you very much, everyone. So I'm still here, Julie, if you need me later on. But I've enjoyed this evening and working and seeing all my friends again. And it really is important to acknowledge your contribution that you guys have made. I've learned a lot from you guys. I'm hoping to learn a heck of a lot about compacting now. And the success of it is a strategy that we might apply in New Zealand. Kia ora.
Pausauraq, did you want to say a few closing words?
Sure. Ariga, so stimulating, brain stimulating. Thank you, everyone, so much. I also was just reminded that, or I just remembered that we did have or hosted what was called the Alaska Education Alignment Summit we coincided it with the Association of Alaska School Boards annual convention so that we could take advantage of the fact that we had school board members from across the state coming for AASB, and they came a few days early, and we looked at what their desires were for education in Alaska. And so I'm going to go back and look at what those results were, and I'm willing to bet that there's many pieces or quotes or things that people said that we could factor into this whole discussion. So I just wanted to make mention of that. I know that ICC Alaska has it on their website, so it's immediately available. And Lance, I just want to say the reason why I chose not to go to a Western post-secondary institution was because I was not going to be brainwashed. So I truly appreciate all of your efforts in everything you're doing at UAS, and I hope they manifest across the system, not just at UAS. So thank you, everyone. Graham, so very nice to see you. Everybody, Liz, for the invitation, and everybody here, and
Julie, Linda, Renee, you folks have any final words before we sign off?
I just want to thank Liz, you and First Alaskans for hosting this. It's really helpful. I want to tell Lance how proud I am, and for those that work with him know that I knew his parents and his grandfather, and his grandfather would be so proud of you, Lance, let alone I know all his brothers and sisters, and so fun on that. So we're very proud of Lance. He's very genuine and honest and direct, and his family would be very proud of you. So good job, Lance. But Graham and Linda on that, thank you so much for joining us and sharing insights. We're not trying to walk down other people's paths, but we're trying to learn from people that are doing other things, because it reflects back to us clear what things are important to us. So thank you so much, and we look forward to you continuing interactions with us. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you've all enjoyed the conversation. It's always good when you're an educator to have conversations that are about education, about the possibilities of education for whether it's Māori people, Alaska Natives, for Indigenous peoples broadly. As you know, Graham said, it's this kind of it either does us harm, or we've got to figure out how to make it work for us. And that's always a vexing issue. That has been our entire careers and the careers of my parents for their entire lives. So it is something we do have to put our mind to. But in the meantime, keep yourselves well in the time of a pandemic, and sending you lots of aroha from Aotearoa, the poor Māori.
How to my sisters for the invitation to be here. True story. If it weren't for Julie Kitka, I don't know where I'd be, because I was gonna go to college. I didn't know if it was for me. And then I was backing out at the last minute, and she just gave me a plane ticket and she said, get out of here. And I don't know what would have happened if she hadn't have done that. So always thankful for everything you've given me and my family. And for all of you, I just look forward to the time when we can look back and say, remember how close our languages came to being gone? Remember when we thought we couldn't just do it on our own? Boy, those were wild times. Look at us now. So keep going, everybody. Keep grinding, and we're going to get it. Chish, hawa. Koyana.
Geez, Wahlagirak, any closing words?
Just say that this segment has reached over 1,400 people. It's been shared 40 times. So thankful for the super rock stars that joined us today. And I have no doubt that just by watching and reading the comments, and if you noticed me wandering with eyes, it's because I'm monitoring the chat and making sure we've got all of our comments and questions being addressed. But so many good things are said in the comment section and so many inspirational statements being made in there. And so I'm so thankful for the time that you've spent with us.
Yeah. And as we close out our time tonight, I just want to tell those of you who are watching with us that this recording will live on the First Alaskans Institute Facebook page, so you can access it whenever you need to. We will also move it over so that there's a recording available on our FAI YouTube page, because we know that there are some people who actually aren't on Facebook. I'm not looking at anyone here in this Zoom, Graham, but we do know that there are lots of folks who aren't on Facebook or can't access it, but can access YouTube, and we want them to be able to watch it as well. And hopefully it's not only exciting, but it gets some really good conversations going in your homes, at your tribes, in your schools across the state of Alaska and across the world, because I know we have our Indigenous brothers and sisters elsewhere who have joined us. So with that, we'll call it good for a hot Friday night, date night, talking about the potential of compacting for schools in Alaska. How about to everyone who joined us? And if we have some more series going on, we're going to make sure to put it out there so you can join us. Pomarie, Linda and Graham, so much for joining us. And we'll see the rest of you soon.